I fell in love with my brother's rival, a man who was uninhibited but affectionate. When we first met, he smiled and took off his jacket, tied it around my waist, gently stroked my head, and reminded me to go to the bathroom. When I was 22, I married him against my parents' wishes, without hesitation, simply to force my parents to invest in saving his family's company. On our wedding day, his first love called him, saying it was his last chance. I was wearing a wedding dress. I begged him not to abandon me. At least don't embarrass me on this occasion. He put down the phone and completed the wedding with me. But since then, he has completely changed. He deliberately left me behind in the mountains late at night. He deliberately let me get drunk at a drinking party and deliberately delayed signing my operation, leaving me to cry in pain. He said, "You obviously chose the low road yourself, but you still pretended to be noble. It's all because you stopped me. Otherwise, she wouldn't have married someone else." Suffering like this, at that moment, my heart completely cooled. I immediately booked a flight for 7 days later. Although everything went according to his wishes, he was still not satisfied when my brother called. I was standing in the middle of the clubhouse's private room, looking at Lucas helplessly, hoping that he could say something for me, but the result disappointed me. "Mrs. Lucas, this is disrespectful. You can't come to a club if you can't drink. You're just asking for trouble." Mr. Williams was joking. "Mrs. Lucas comes from a good family. She's not like us. She's someone. We forgot. She's got a great brother and parents. If all else fails, she can be forced to marry. She really is her mother's little princess." I stood awkwardly in the middle. Like a clown, I was looked down on, mocked and ridiculed by the group. Lucas sat at the head of the table. The Italian suit he had custom-made perfectly accentuated his figure. He crossed his legs. His long legs looked exceptionally slender in the trousers. He held a wine glass in his hand. He casually shook it. This was his territory. No one dared to show him disrespect. He smiled at me, but his eyes were cold. "Emma, just one glass of wine. You have to give my business associate's face. Otherwise, it will be difficult for me to get along in the business world." I clenched my lower lip. My eyes were filled with tears. He knew I was allergic to alcohol. In the past, he even laughed and helped me avoid drinking. But now he has pushed me into this situation himself. I'm allergic to alcohol. I really can't drink. After saying this, my tears could no longer be held back. I turned around and tried to leave this place that made me feel so embarrassed. However, I was stopped at the door by the bodyguards. Those people smiled and handed me a glass of wine. They said, "It's just a glass of wine. You can't go wrong with a glass of wine. Mrs. Lucas, please." I stood there, with a sad look in my eyes, looking at the man sitting at the head of the table, hoping in my heart that he would shield me from the storm as he always had in the past. He put down his glass, put his hands on my shoulders. The feeling of protection could not have been clearer. My nose grew moist. I wanted to hide in his broad, warm embrace, to find some comfort. It seems that he still cares about me. Emma is a heroine among women. This little bit of alcohol is nothing. He poured a shot into the glass. Thoughtfully, he brought the glass to my lips. I stared straight at him. I saw the seriousness and malice in his eyes. My whole body froze as if I had fallen into an ice cellar. My heart slowly sank. An endless pain welled up. Numbly, I picked up the glass. I gulped it down in one go. The alcohol burned down my throat. It hurt like hell. I couldn't help but bend over and dry heave. The people around me were like flies. White wine and foreign liquor mixed together. They were passed to my lips. "Mrs. Lucas, do us the honor." At that moment, my brother's phone rang, but the people still wouldn't give up. Some even put their hands on my waist. I was so angry that I knocked over all the glasses. As a result, I accidentally fell on my knees on the broken glass. I didn't care about the cuts on my legs and arms. My hands trembled as I answered my brother's call. "Emma, why did it take you so long to answer the phone? What happened?" My brother's gentle voice made me cry. I tried hard to hold back my tears. I wiped my eyes. I opened my mouth several times before I could speak. No, I wasn't looking at my phone just now, but my brother could hear the crying and trembling in my voice. "Did Lucas do something to upset you? My brother will be right back. Don't worry, I'm here. Be good." Unfriendly glances and sneers surrounded me. Lucas stood high above me. He looked down at me. His eyes were full of mixed emotions. My skirt was soaked with wine. I was kneeling on the ground like a homeless dog. My tears wouldn't stop. I desperately wipe away the tears. I try to catch my breath, but my body still trembles uncontrollably. My stomach also hurts badly, but I don't want to cause my brother any more trouble. Because of my selfishness, my brother had to go abroad to develop the market. He is already very tired. I can only pretend to be fine and laugh. No, I just miss you. I haven't had my brother's cooking for a long time. My brother laughed over there. I am your servant. I take care of you every day. After all, you are the only one in our family. Once I'm done with this, I'll come back and take care of you again. Okay, my stomach hurt more and more. I quickly mumbled a few words in agreement. I hung up the phone hastily. I was afraid that my brother would hear that something was wrong. I curled up on the floor. I covered my stomach tightly. My body also started to break out in rashes. I cried and begged Lucas to take me to the hospital. He touched my shoulder with the tip of his shoe. His tone was still lazy. Don't pretend. If you want to go, hurry up. No one will indulge your problems. I was shaking with pain. My fingers clutched the man's trouser leg. I begged. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I dare not do it again, please. Please call an ambulance for me. My trousers were suddenly yanked away. I was powerless to resist. I could only hug myself tightly. I hoped to faint. That way I wouldn't feel the pain. As my consciousness faded, I heard the waitress scream, the siren of the ambulance, and the solid chest of the man. Tears silently slipped down my face. I really realized that I was wrong. In junior high school, I knew that my brother had a sworn enemy named Lucas. The two of them were always at each other's throats. They couldn't stand each other. They had minor arguments every 3 days and a major fight every 5 days. I was curious about a man who could rival my brother. Unfortunately, I never saw his face. The first time I saw him was on my way home alone after evening study in high school. The street was noisy. A few punks with dyed yellow hair cornered me with a bottle of wine. I pretended to be calm. I gave them all the money in my bag. But after they took the money, they still looked at me with evil intent, just when I was completely desperate. Lucas walked over towards me, illuminated by the streetlight. I stared at him in disbelief. He easily beat the bullies and they fled. I sobbed and thanked him, but he took off his jacket and put it around my waist. He gently touched my head and reminded me to go to the bathroom. His body gave off a scent that was a mixture of soap and sweat, but it wasn't unpleasant. I took the sanitary napkin he handed me. My face suddenly turned red, apart from my father and brother. This was the first time that another man had bought me this. As I walked over to him with a flushed face, I was just about to thank him again when my brother suddenly punched him in the face. How dare you touch my sister? I'm not finished with you. I quickly stopped my brother and explained what had happened. My brother trembled slightly with fear. In the end, he bowed to his adversary. Convinced. Lucas laughed nonchalantly. He casually rubbed my head a few times. For the sake of my sister, I'll let you off this time. From then on, my brother drove me to and from school every day. Every time Lucas saw me, he would smile and call me sister. He also often gave me snacks and small gifts. Soon, the entire high school knew that I was Lucas and Ryan's sister. From the age of 16 to 21, at my birthday parties every year, I would receive a gift from him. Sometimes it was expensive jewelry and diamonds. Sometimes it was little things he made himself. He was still the same carefree guy. He would laugh and rub my hair every time. He would call me sister in a soft voice. And he could always conjure up all kinds of new gadgets. Anyone who can stand up to their brother must be something. When I turned 22, the core technology of Lucas's family technology department was stolen. The situation changed overnight. Even the bank refused to lend money. His eyes were dark, but he still handed me a gift. He urged me to go to bed. Go to bed early. Stay healthy. Don't stay up late when you're growing. He came to see my parents late at night. He wanted them to invest in Lucas Group. I volunteered to marry him, because only in this way would my parents be willing to invest. He had no way to refuse, and no reason to refuse. Our wedding was very rushed. There was no grand ceremony, no jokes and blessings from friends, and there was no wedding dress like I had dreamed of, but I don't regret it at all. On the day of the wedding, Lucas suddenly got a phone call. I could hear the woman on the other end crying. She questioned him. She got angry, and finally said she would give him another chance. I had never seen him like that before, and I didn't know what kind of relationship the woman had with him. All I knew was that he left. I lost my last shred of face. I was wearing a wedding dress. I desperately tried to keep him. Emotional interests face cooperation. When I woke up again, I saw the snow-white ceiling of the hospital. Lucas was sitting by the bed, silently smoking. 7 years had made him less sharp. He had become even more inscrutable. My stomach still ached. I rolled over and turned my back to him. My heart was full of bitterness. I began to regret it. I regretted my impulsive decision to marry him. He had not been seen for more than 10 days. I lie in the hospital every day, staring blankly at the ceiling. I dare not think deeply about whether or not the years of marriage have been worthwhile. Although my brother is very busy, he calls me every day and keeps sending me all kinds of gifts from abroad. Perhaps he can hear my fatigue. With a hoarse voice, he persuades me. Emma, haven't you always wanted to continue your studies? My brother has applied for you at the University of California. That's the school you've always wanted to go to. My mind suddenly goes blank. I remembered my dreams and plans for the future when I was young. I couldn't hold back any longer. I burst into tears. I had forgotten all about it over the years, but my brother still remembered. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, Lucas, who rarely showed up at the hospital, appeared in a well-fitting suit. He looked a little tired. He smiled and put his arms around me. It was as if nothing had happened. I couldn't help but stare at his gentle and considerate smile. He always treated me like this, sometimes passionately, sometimes coldly, sometimes close, sometimes distant. I thought about the application I had submitted for admission. I turned to look at him. I asked casually, I want to continue my studies. What do you think? The man sneered. His tone was full of mockery. You, just say you want money. Don't make up those excuses. I felt a pang of sadness in my heart. I didn't say anything more. When the car pulled into the old mansion, I became nervous. I asked, didn't you say you wanted to go home? Why did you bring me to the old mansion? My parents called and asked me to take you home for dinner. What, are you uncomfortable eating with my parents? I didn't say anything more. I followed him into the old mansion like a piece of furniture. No one seemed to notice me. They were all gathered around Lucas, concerned about him. They said he had lost weight. It broke their hearts. Although the table was full of delicious food, there was nothing I liked. I sat silently in the corner waiting for what would happen next. In the past, Lucas's parents were especially nice to me. They would always prepare all kinds of snacks for me. Lucas's mother even cooked for me herself. Lucas always joked that he was adopted. I'm the one who was born to them. After marrying Lucas, they started to pick on me in every way. They felt that I wasn't virtuous enough. I didn't win Lucas's heart, and they also thought that I was infertile. The fact that I didn't get pregnant soon made them feel that I wasn't smart enough in the business world. I can't help him. Before, I always hoped that he could help me, even if it was just to change the subject. But it's as if he doesn't hear me at all. He just keeps eating and drinking, as if none of it has anything to do with him. Now, I don't have any expectations anymore. Emma, I'm not going to be a nag. It's been 7 years since you got married and you still don't have a child. You should really pay more attention. It's as if my soul has been sucked out of me. I see myself mechanically agreeing. I'm so obedient that I doubt it's really me. I really don't know how your parents raised you. And your brother, he's so old and still not married. Is there something he's hiding? She squeezed her palms together. I don't care how sarcastic you are, but you must never mock my brother in such a way. You should spend less time with your brother in the future. Not everyone can just come into our home, especially not those who don't know any rules. As soon as I heard this, my anger instantly rose. I slammed the table. The delicate china on the table shattered. Hot soup and food splattered everywhere, spilling on each of them. No matter what my brother does, he will not let the company's core technology be stolen. Don't forget, if it weren't for our family's investment, it's doubtful that Lucas Group would have survived until now, before Lucas's mother could say anything. Lucas's face turned stern. He grabbed my chin in one hand and said sternly, "Apologize to your mother." My jaw hurt like it had been drilled. My feet involuntarily went up on tiptoe, but I couldn't stop the tears. It turned out that he had been able to hear all along. He heard Lucas's mother laughing at me, and he saw my embarrassment. Everything that followed became a complete mess. Lucas's mother's yelling, Lucas's father's contempt. I gradually felt suffocated. I desperately slapped his arm. Suddenly, the butler yelled, "Blood. I'm bleeding. I realize I'm bleeding." The blood slowly runs down my inner thigh. It stains the expensive handmade carpet red. Lucas sees this. He's beside himself with worry. He picks me up directly and rushes to the hospital, without even bothering to start the car. When we arrive at the hospital, I smell the familiar smell of disinfectant. I smile bitterly to myself. This hospital is almost like home to me. Lucas stood by the hospital bed, looking tired. There were a few stubble hairs on his chin. He looked at me with mixed feelings. "Emma, we're going to have a baby." My jaw still ached slightly. An indescribable sense of absurdity welled up in my heart. My eyes were suddenly sore. I turned my head. I didn't want to look at him. He seemed to have suddenly become the familiar person I knew. His chin lightly rubbed against the top of my head. His voice carried a hint of persuasion. "I'm sorry. It was my brother's fault. Give me another chance. I will make it up to you." I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. The grievances that had built up over the years welled up in my heart. I pounded on him. My voice was full of sobs. "Why didn't you protect me? Why? You were never good to me." But from that day on, life became as beautiful as we had hoped. He left work on time every day to eat with me. He often brought me little gifts. He would whisper stories to me at night, and he was patient when I went shopping for baby products. I always felt that he was distracted and a little anxious. This made me feel uneasy too. The day before my antenatal appointment, he received a phone call. He said apologetically that he couldn't accompany me. I comforted him, saying that there would be plenty of opportunities in the future, but I couldn't help following him in my car. I followed him all the way to the hospital. I followed him to the outside of the ward. I heard that familiar voice. It was the voice of his first love, Lucas. I thought the matching had been a success. Why won't they operate on me? She is now the esteemed Mrs. Lucas, and pregnant with your child. How could she possibly be willing to donate bone marrow to me? Maybe I shouldn't have bothered you. I saw Lucas bend over in pain, hugging the self-pitying woman. He said softly, "Sophia, just wait a little longer. I'll find a way to solve the baby problem. She owes you this." I subconsciously took a few steps back. I accidentally bumped into the nurse carrying the tray. Lucas immediately looked back at me. Our gazes met at that moment. I ran as hard as I could, with only one thought in my mind. Everything is fake. Everything is fake. The happiness these days is just a superficial illusion. He actually wanted to hurt my child and asked me to donate bone marrow for that woman. The man behind me suddenly grabbed me. He held my wrist tightly, trying to control his emotions. "Emma, we can still have children in the future, but Sophia's life is now hanging in the balance. We can't just stand by and do nothing." I looked at him with tears in my eyes. My heart was breaking. So what? So I have to abort my child to save her. "Lucas, since you had a girlfriend back then, why did you agree to the alliance?" He stopped talking. He grabbed me tightly and started walking towards the hospital. I tried to break free. I didn't care about my reputation. I bit him on the wrist. I turned around and ran. Suddenly, I heard heart-wrenching cries behind me. I froze. My feet felt like they were nailed to the ground. I could only watch the car crash into me. Cold sweat kept running down my forehead. I could clearly feel something dripping from under me. Lucas was standing right behind the hospital bed. When he heard the news that the baby could not be saved, he immediately asked, "So can I have the bone marrow donation operation now?" The doctor and nurses looked at him in surprise. My heart sank. The hospital director hurried over. He explained that in principle it was not possible, but the Lucas family owned 32% of the shares in the hospital, so he was the principal. Lucas kissed my forehead gently. He said, "Emma, everything is for the best. When Sophia is well, I will live with you happily." I turned my head weakly. Numb, I was pushed into the operating room in order to keep the bone marrow nerves active. No anesthesia can be used during the surgery. Big hands were fumbling inside me. I screamed and cried in pain until I fainted. I even bent the bedside guardrail. After 2 consecutive mobilization injections, I felt every bone in my body ache. I couldn't sleep all night. The bodyguards outside my room never left. They were there to prevent me from escaping. When I saw the acceptance letter from the University of California in the mailbox, I used my brother's credit card to buy a plane ticket for 7 days later. With trembling hands, 2 days later, Sophia had her surgery. Lucas stayed by her side the whole time, taking care of her. I was under close guard by the bodyguards. In case anything happened, before the operation, I heard Sophia ask anxiously, "Lucas, is Emma really willing to do this?" Lucas gently reassured her. She was the one who proposed the marriage in the first place. Now she shouldn't pretend to be virtuous. She owes you this. Otherwise, she wouldn't have got leukemia. Although I was mentally prepared, when I heard them chatting so carefree, my heart still couldn't help but ache. It turned out, I was the one who was too humble. After the operation, when the retention needle was removed, I felt dizzy. Fortunately, the nanny brought pig liver soup in time. She said it could nourish the blood. I smelled the smell. I couldn't help but vomit heavily. Lucas clearly knew that I didn't eat animal offal, but he didn't care at all. He kept guarding the door of the ICU observation room. His worry and anxiety on his face were real. I staggered to take a taxi back to the villa. I rummaged through the house looking for my documents and packing my suitcase. Looking at the small, empty suitcase, I suddenly realized I had been a joke from beginning to end. I stared at the children's clothes hanging in the closet. I knelt on the floor and cried so hard I could hardly speak. I hated myself for not being able to protect it. For several days, Lucas did not come home. The nanny cooked different meals every day and delivered them to the hospital. But every time I went downstairs to eat, there was only cold leftovers. The day I left, I called Lucas from the airport lounge. I reminded him to sign the divorce papers. I admitted that I was wrong. I wanted to put things back to the way they were. His concerned voice came over the phone. I told you not to move, didn't I? I'll just feed you. It's fine now. Does the bruise on your hand hurt? But he wasn't talking to me. I looked at myself. The needle marks on my arm had turned purple and black. My lower abdomen ached intermittently. My muscles were still weak and sore. He couldn't see any of this. He didn't care. He didn't even notice that I wasn't at home anymore. I didn't say anything more. I hung up the phone and left. Lucas wasn't incapable of love. He just didn't love me. When my brother saw me at the airport, his eyes reddened. He gritted his teeth and said, "Lucas has always taken care of you. Come on, let's go back together. I'll ask for an explanation for you." I smiled and wiped away the tears from my brother's eyes. I didn't want to go back to that place. My brother treated me very well. He hired a maid to cook for me. Every day, he tried every means to make me happy. The invisible wounds on my body slowly healed. I still didn't like going out. The maid was a little worried. She suggested that my brother take me to see a psychologist. I wanted to say something, but I don't know how to argue back. That night, my brother canceled work and took me out. I didn't expect that my brother would take me to a fortune teller. "What did you think I was taking you to?" The fortune teller said to me bluntly. "Let me tell your fortune and see how your luck is faring." He told me, "There are some unfavorable factors in my destiny, which have caused everything to go wrong recently. However," he reassured me, "I have already passed the most difficult period. Good times will soon come." In short, Lucas really bothered me. I nodded, feeling that the old things are more useful. When I left, I saw my brother quietly slip a large sum of money to the gentleman. Tears suddenly couldn't be controlled. My brother held me in his arms, patting my back gently and said, "Don't think about those past things. My brother will always be with you." From that day on, I stopped staying at home all day. I started doing the things I loved again. I learned to swim and play tennis. I went to cafes in my spare time, and I quietly read books. Lucas didn't notice I was gone until half a month later. The housekeeper and nanny had no idea where I had gone. He said angrily, "She just had a miscarriage and an operation, and you don't even know where she went. What am I paying you people for?" He called me a dozen times, but there was no answer. He sent me a text message with a lot of anger. "Emma, I'm already very tired. Don't cause me any more trouble. You must come home within 3 days. Otherwise, I'll be angry. When Sophia is well, I'll go with you to the old house. Mum won't blame you." When I read this text message, I couldn't help feeling both angry and amused. But his words did remind me. There was no point in keeping the phone card in China. It would have been better to cancel it earlier. When he couldn't get in touch with me, he realized something was wrong. When he called, a stranger answered the phone. When he called my brother, there was no answer. He panicked. He hurried to the old house to find out where I was. Lucas' mother accused me sarcastically. She said I was incompetent. I couldn't even take care of a child. I was the only person who could do something like deliberately losing contact. I might as well get a divorce. Lucas frowned. "Mom, Emma is not like that. She is my wife and your daughter-in-law. Don't say things like that again. It makes her sad." He searched all over Los Angeles. He even found my old neighbor and friend. My friend looked at him in confusion. "You're asking me, isn't that your wife? And I haven't been in touch with her for a long time." Lucas was stunned. He didn't seem to understand why we had broken up. "After all, I've always liked to have fun. I have friends all over the place. How dare you ask? Emma only has eyes for you. I don't see you treating her very well. The story of you letting her drink at the club has been all over town. Luckily, Ryan wasn't there. Otherwise, he would have fought with you." He wanted to explain. But when the words came to his lips, he realized he had nothing to say. The sight of me that night, covered in bruises, came back to his mind. Only now did he realize that he had gone too far. Sophia waited in the hospital for 3 days. She never saw him. The nanny at Lucas' house became increasingly cold towards her. She was like before, crying and calling out in pain on the phone. Lucas sat by the bed, looking at the bruises on her hands. remembering the long needle that pierced my arm and the dark purple bruises. "You're in so much pain. What about her?" He didn't dare think any further. He staggered out of the ward. He accidentally entered the maternity ward. Through the thick operating room door, he heard the cries of pain coming from inside. The man outside the door asked the nurse in a panic, "Didn't you give her an anesthetic? How can she still be in pain even after an anesthetic?" Lucas finally couldn't hold back anymore. He suddenly sat on the ground. If an anesthetic can cause such pain, if she didn't have an anesthetic and had her placenta manually removed, how much pain would she feel? He looked at the girl he had grown up with. He knew best. Even a pinprick would have to be coaxed for a long time. He slapped himself hard. He felt remorseful in his heart. What on earth had he done? Lucas suddenly understood something. He hurriedly drove home by jumping red lights. He rummaged through the boxes looking for my various documents. When he saw the divorce agreement on the bedside table, his heart felt like it had been hit hard. I didn't take anything from this house. His hands trembled as he dialed his assistant's number. "Check for me. Check the flight of the madam." The assistant answered. "Lucas, always. Sophia is in the hospital now. I told you to check the flight of the madam. What does she have to do with it?" "My madam is Emma." "I'm sorry, boss. I've been taking care of Sophia. I didn't react just now." Lucas hung up the phone with slightly trembling hands. Everyone around him reminded him. He had ignored his wife, the girl he had raised since childhood. I kept calling my brother, from morning till night. Finally, I got through. "Is Emma with you?" "Let me speak to her, brother." My brother sneered without saying a word. Finally spoke. "You only noticed she'd been missing for a month. Lucas, you'd better get a divorce. Or don't blame me for being unforgiving." At that moment, Sophia had entered the master bedroom at some point. She was wearing a skimpy nightdress. It clung to the broad shoulders of the man. Lucas pushed her away sharply, frowning, confused and angry. "What are you doing?" She fell to her knees, looking pitiful. "Lucas, we were both forced to do it. Now she's gone. Isn't it good that things have returned to normal? Who says she's gone? She's my wife. This is her home, Sophia. We've both changed. What happened tonight never happened. Please go." Sophia was shocked. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Lucas, you'd rather risk the reputation of our families. You'd even sacrifice your child to save me. And you say you don't love me. I don't believe you. All the care you've shown me over the past few days. Was it all a lie? You'd rather abandon Emma than neglect me. That shows you do care about me." Lucas stood there. His heart was pounding. It felt as if someone had a firm grip on his heart. Even breathing became difficult. He was no innocent boy. Even Sophia had noticed. And Emma, she must have known even better. Thinking about this, he didn't care about anything else. He immediately bought the ticket for the next flight. He went straight to the airport. He had to bring her back. He would never divorce her. On the campus of the University of California, I saw Lucas again. He was holding a bright red bouquet of roses. Standing there, he attracted the attention of the students around him. He said to me, "Emma, I know I was wrong. Come back with me." The man who had always been arrogant since childhood lowered his head. On one knee, he begged for my forgiveness. If it had been before, I might have been moved to tears, but now I just felt annoyed. My brother suddenly punched him in the face without mercy. Lucas didn't fight back. He let his brother hit him. He said, "Go ahead. Hit me as hard as you like. I deserve it." I quickly ran over to my brother and held him back. I looked at the bruise on his finger with a heartbroken expression. I said, "A little angry and a little helpless, brother. Why bother with someone who has nothing to do with this?" Lucas froze in place. My words were like a sharp sword. They pierced his heart. It hurt so much that he could hardly breathe. He reached out his hand. He wanted to hold the hem of my skirt. I pretended not to see. I took the sunflower from my brother's hand. I unceremoniously broke off a seed and ate it. Then I walked hand in hand with my brother. We went home to do our homework. Emma stopped. She looked at the scattered roses on the ground. She asked me softly, "Do you know what I like? I like sunflowers. I don't like roses. I like fruit juice. I don't like alcohol. I like a committed relationship. I don't like a womanizer." "Lucas, what do you want now? You're begging for forgiveness. That's not necessary. My time is precious. I don't want to waste it on you. I've always been curious. Why didn't you set the record straight before you got married? Instead, you played the victim. It was really uncomfortable. You've made my life difficult for years. Is it because I broke up you and Sophia, or because you hated the helpless person you were back then?" Lucas lowered his head embarrassedly. I sneered. It seems he knew in his heart. He just blamed it all on me for a month straight. He made breakfast every day and delivered it to my doorstep. But my brother kicked it away, told him to feed it to the dog. He followed me to the cafeteria and the library every day. He didn't do anything. He just followed from afar. Every time my brother saw him, he would beat him up. As a result, the two of them became celebrities at school. I stopped my brother. I asked him what he really wanted. Lucas opened his mouth. After a long while, he spoke with difficulty. I didn't know that you were such a good student. These days, he saw a different side of her. She confidently and calmly discussed academic issues with the professor. She completed the course with great joy. On the way home, she would even buy a bouquet of sunflowers. There was always a smile on her face. Unlike before, when she was always crying, I couldn't help but smile when I heard this. I kindly reminded him, "Lucas, you were the one who said I wasn't cut out for studying. Don't bother." He felt like he had been slapped hard. He froze in place, not knowing what to say. He stammered, "Emma, I love you. I really love you. Before, I didn't understand my own feelings. Now I know. Please, please give me another chance. Please." I look out the window. My heart is full of exhaustion. I'm 29 years old this year. I've been married for 7 years. I've endured the cold stares of Lucas' family. I've been drunk by you. I've been fooled by you. I've even been in a car accident. I take a deep breath. My voice is a little choked up. I've lost my child. I also experienced the pain of having the placenta removed without anesthesia. I looked back at him. He could no longer bear it. He bent over and knelt on the ground. He was crying so hard he could hardly speak. "I have already transplanted Sophia's bone marrow. What more do you want from me, Lucas? If you really feel sorry for me, then never show your face in front of me again." My brother gritted his teeth in anger. His eyes were red. He has always respected me and was afraid to mention my sorrows, so he never asked. But he didn't know. I've had such a terrible time all these years. He walked up quickly and grabbed Lucas by the collar, speaking sternly to him. "Lucas, you Lucas family must guard it well." Lucas just looked at me blankly, crying and laughing at the same time, and replied softly, "Yes, I won't bother you again," he said, and staggered out the door. He cried and laughed. In the end, he completely broke down. Without saying a word, my brother grabbed me and rushed to the hospital. He insisted that I get a full-body checkup. When he saw the medical report, his face suddenly turned ugly. Then, he took me to see an old Chinese doctor to take my pulse. In the end, he came home with a big bag of bitter medicine in his hands. I secretly wiped away my tears. I tried to be cute. "Brother, I'm really afraid of bitter things." My brother grabbed the back of my neck. He sneered and said, "It's good to be afraid of bitter things. Only by knowing bitterness can you remember it. You actually fancy a man like that. You really are asking for it." My brother became busier and busier. He was busy expanding his business overseas. He forced Lucas's family to have no choice but to retreat. They eventually went bankrupt and went into liquidation. When Lucas heard the news, the tip of the pen paused slightly, but he quickly continued signing. He began to try to experience pain. He hung out at the clubhouse, mixing and matching different kinds of alcohol. He even deliberately ate nuts, to which he was allergic. He felt the sharp pain in his stomach and the itchy, painful rash all over his body. Yet a twisted pleasure welled up in his heart. So this is what suffering feels like. After his assistant had driven him home, his nanny hurried to make a hangover remedy. He frowned as soon as he took a sip. He told the nanny to make it the way she had always made it. The nanny replied, "Your wife used to make it for you. I don't know the recipe." The sweet soup was still sweet when he took the first sip, but it soon became bitter. He finished it in one go. He looked up at the empty living room. The strange cushions and dolls on the sofa were gone. A layer of dust had accumulated on the rocking chair by the French windows. There were no more slippers scattered on the otherwise clean floor. He slowly walked to the master bedroom. It was pitch black inside. There was no longer the warm light that had been on for him. Lucas began to become obsessed with the feeling of pain, as if this would make him feel what I felt at that time. He went to the hospital to try the childbirth simulator. The intense pain of the contractions made his veins bulge, but he smiled idiotically. "So this is what it feels like to remove the placenta without anesthetic." He had just finished saying that. The trainee nurse immediately corrected him. "Don't think about it. Removing the placenta without anesthetic is incredibly painful. This is no comparison at all." Lucas's face instantly turned pale. His ears were buzzing. It seemed as if he could hear me screaming and crying in pain. The sound was so miserable that it made his heart stop. Breathing became difficult. He began to do charity work recklessly. Whenever there was a chance to match bone marrow donations, he would try. If there was no match, he would frequently donate blood, until the needle marks on his arms turned black and purple. He walks aimlessly down the street. His eyes fall on the sunflowers in front of the florists. Only then does he fully understand. It's all far from enough. He can never truly understand my pain. He crouches in front of the florists, staring at the blooming sunflowers. Tears flow unstoppably. He once had a ray of light, but he put it out with his own hands. My brother signed the divorce papers for me. Along with the notice came a large sum of money from Lucas. My brother didn't care about the money, but I was overjoyed. Donate it, donate it. This money can build a lot of schools, just do it for the sake of that child. My brother silently hugged me. I patted his shoulder lightly. In fact, I understood in my heart. My brother had gone to great lengths for me. He would rather suffer himself than let the Lucas family pay the price. I couldn't help my brother in business. I could only study hard. In the future, I will join the company's research and development department. I will help my brother develop more patents. The day I graduated from graduate school, I heard news about the Lucas family again. My brother deliberately put down his work to attend my graduation ceremony. I smiled and handed him a gift, my latest patent in the field of computer science and an offer for admission to the doctoral program. My brother also gave me a big gift, the Lucas Group's equity transfer document. He told me, "Now you are the largest shareholder. You can do whatever you want with it." I rejected the deal. For Lucas, losing his wealth was not the greatest pain. He would spend the rest of his life in endless guilt and regret. That was the real torment. As for me, I didn't want to waste any time or energy on him. That would only make me feel unworthy. My time was precious. I didn't want to waste it on someone who didn't matter. My brother saw that I had relaxed, and he also felt relieved. He put his arm around my shoulders and said, "Let's go. I've picked out a lot of men for you. There are all kinds. You can choose whichever one you like. Men don't matter. The important thing is that you give me a child. Our family really does have an inheritance to pass on." I slapped his arm angrily. I kept complaining in my mouth, "You're over 30 years old. Why are you still so immature?" But a smile could not be helped at the corner of my mouth. It was really a blessing from my ancestors. Our family has produced a doctor. I'll treat you to a big meal. I'd rather have you cook for me. Your servant obeys. That year, Boer Roman II, I saw Lucas again. He appeared before me without warning. He had become incredibly thin. I heard that he drank heavily. He didn't care even when he was diagnosed with stomach cancer. After Lucas' family went bankrupt and was liquidated, he disappeared. No one knows where he went. "Emma, have you been well all these years?" Seeing that I didn't answer, he didn't care. He just sat on the street corner and said, "I want to know how much pain you suffered all those years, but I can never really understand how you felt. I've had a lot of dreams these years. I dreamt of a little girl crying and asking me, why did I do this to her? Sunflowers were everywhere in the dream. There were so many that it scared me. If I hadn't been so stubborn for my ridiculous pride and deliberately ignored you, how good it would be. I would bring you a bouquet of sunflowers every day, gently kiss your forehead in the morning, and we would have a warm and happy home." I didn't have time to listen to him go on about this. My supervisor was still waiting for me to discuss my thesis. I walked straight past him and walked quickly towards the office building. Lucas suddenly called out to me. Blood was already oozing from the corner of his mouth. "Emma, do you hate me? It's fine if you do. At least you'll still remember me." Looking at him like this, I shook my head. "I don't hate you. That would be too exhausting." I didn't stop again. I just walked straight towards my future. A homeless man had died on the street. The shops nearby all felt pretty unlucky about it. When I heard the news that Lucas had died, I thought of the time when he was 17. He took off his jacket and put it around my waist. He called me his little sister in a mischievous way. If only life could always be as simple as it was when we first met.